So flash forward 35 years. Now I'm in my mid-40s, same age my father was when he passed away. I've got 2 teenage daughters, been married 20 years. And all of a sudden, out of absolutely nowhere, I discover very, very much by accident that my father had actually died by suicide. I maintained that outward-facing life for a very long time, and I would come home and get my kids settled and do the mom thing that I would do. And then I would go into our bedroom at night and I would cry myself to sleep. I have a love-hate relationship with grief. Grieving never ends. We're always grieving the people we love, and I wouldn't ever want that to end. People are territorial, I think, in some ways. And so it may come across as like, oh, but my trauma, but my grief, but my loss, but, I look at it differently. We are bonded in grief. We are bonded in loss. We are bonded if you're navigating mental illness or caring for someone who is.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Broken Beautiful Me, Stories of Hope, Gratitude, and Resilience. This is our sacred space where we meet with people to have conversations that allow for soul deep healing. And today I am so fortunate to have as our guest Lisa Sugarman. Lisa is an author, a nationally syndicated columnist, a 3-time survivor of suicide loss. She's a passionate mental health advocate, a crisis counselor with the Trevor Project, and a storyteller with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, using her lived experience to help others find healing through connection and community. Lisa is the founder of HelpHUB, the most inclusive and comprehensive free online destination for mental health resources, tools, crisis hotlines, and content designed to support the diverse mental health needs of every community. She also co-hosts the Survivors podcast, a show for anyone affected by suicide or mental illness, providing candid conversations and real stories of survival. In addition to her podcast work, Lisa facilitates Safe Place, a virtual support group for survivors of suicide loss at Samaritan's South Coast in Boston. She's also the author of How to Raise Perfectly Imperfect Kids and Be Okay with It, Untying Parental Anxiety, and Life It Is What It Is. A frequent contributor to the Mental Health Television Network, Lisa's writing has also been featured in Calmary, Healthline Parenthood, Grown and Flown, Today Parents, Thrive Global, Little Things, The Washington Post, and Psychology Today. She lives and writes just north of Boston, and we can learn more about her work at thehelphub.co. Welcome, Lisa, to the show. It's so lovely to have you here.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much. It's just as lovely to be here.
So I want to start for our listeners who may not know kind of about your journey. Your work as a mental health advocate really began after a deeply personal loss. Can you share a little bit about your story and how this started you on this journey to help others?
Sure, absolutely. So the story is a little windy for me. So you mentioned it. You said I was a 3-time suicide loss survivor, which is true. Those losses started way, way back. I was 9 years old when I experienced my first loss, which just so happened to be a suicide, unfortunately. My cousin passed away. He lived right up the road, a half a mile away. He was 18 years old. He took his life. And that was really kind of my introduction to grief and to loss and to suicide, which was something that back in the 1970s, nobody was talking about. But my parents did find a way to communicate that to me, to let me know what that was. So I was very well aware of that at an early age. The year after I lost my cousin, my father passed away very, very suddenly. And this is the part of my story that gets a little, I guess, unusual. And it's because he did pass away from what I was told was a heart attack. And he was a heavy, heavy smoker, super fit, but also a heavy smoker, which at the time was a sign of the times. And I lived with that narrative that my dad had died of a heart attack in his sleep for 35 years. I had no reason in the world to disbelieve that. I went through my life, got married, had kids, was a content creator in a lot of different ways. I was a newspaper reporter and wrote for magazines and worked for publishing companies. So I did a lot in the content creation space, and ultimately kind of ended up as a parenting author because that's what I was in the thick of, was just raising our two daughters. So flash forward 35 years, now I'm in my mid 40s, same age my father was when he passed away. I've got two teenage daughters, been married 20 years. And all of a sudden, out of absolutely nowhere, I discover very, very much by accident that my father had actually died by suicide. So I started all over again. All of a sudden, now at the age of 45, as a mom, I'm re-grieving my father all over again, but now I'm a survivor of suicide loss, which I didn't know anything about, had no idea what that meant or what to expect from that. And several years after that, I ended up again experiencing another loss. My husband and I lost one of our closest childhood friends, also very suddenly, also to suicide. So that's the three that I've lost that way. And it was really losing my father again and that way that really just shifted my work entirely. It shifted my mission. I just didn't feel connected as much to the work that I was doing. It's not that I didn't think it was authentic. It was, absolutely it was. But I didn't think it was where I belonged. And I really, in all fairness, I shut down for a few years after learning about my dad's suicide. And I didn't know how to go forward. I didn't know what to do with it. It seemed impossible to me to know my dad. You would never have thought. He was one of those people who presented in the most joyful and alive and intentional sort of ways. Everything about him was so intentional, and he was so present all the time, and you just never knew anything was wrong. So it took a long time to get my mind around that. And then when I did, I really just felt like now I had a very unusual story and a lot of lived experience, and I needed to do something with it. So I did the thing that ultimately that I've always done, which is to talk about it and to write about it. And it just went in a million different directions that I never expected. And it brought me here.
That must have been, you say that, you kind of, it took a few years. That must have been an incredibly, at first, a groundless moment for you where, the truth that you had known for all of your life was suddenly upended. How did you find your way from that? Like, what did you do to kind of narrow in and say, okay, now I'm going to come back. I had this life experience, and this is what my focus is going to be.
I don't know that there was any one thing that I did initially. I think the one thing that I did was just allow myself to sit in it in whatever way I needed to. And that meant a lot of nights just curling up next to my husband in bed and crying myself to sleep for 3 years, really, and, to be honest, that's what it looked like for me. I had 2 very separate lives at that time. It was a very weird place to be for me because I was still a mom, I was still working, I was a wife, I had my friends and my outward facing life, and it wasn't like I was ashamed, it wasn't like I was really feeling the stigma, it was just feeling just unsettled and confused and not really knowing what to do with it all, because it was a new identity. So, I maintained that outward facing life for a very long time, and I would come home and get my kids settled and do the mom thing that I would do, and then I would go into our bedroom at night and I would cry myself to sleep, and I did that just believing that that's what I needed to do to get to the next step. I didn't get into therapy for a period of time. It took years for me to actually end up going into therapy because I felt like I just needed a different space to process, a different perspective, and it ultimately was the best thing I ever did. But I really just rode with it, to be honest, Kelly. Like there was no magic formula to what I did. The catalyst for me, I think the turning point for me was a few years in. I started identifying as an advocate, started realizing that I wanted to be in this space to help other people avoid making the decision that my father made. And I wasn't sure what that looked like. I just knew that I wanted to do advocacy work. And so I started getting involved with organizations like the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention here in Boston and Samaritans here in Boston. And I started looking into other ways to get involved and do things. And one of those things that just made so much sense in my brain was I should consider being a lifeline counselor. I wish my father had had those kinds of resources. Wouldn't that have potentially changed the outcome? Maybe. So I felt like I needed to be in that space. So I got aligned with the Trevor Project and trained to be a crisis counselor. I've been on their lifelines now for this is my 4th year, taking calls from people who were like my dad, who didn't want to continue. So I started doing things like that. And ultimately, I ended up on someone's podcast. They saw something I had written. It was the first thing I had ever written publicly about my father's suicide, acknowledging it publicly. And it was someone in Canada, someone I didn't know, and she had a show and said my story resonated with her and she wanted me to talk. Would I be willing? And never gave anything like that any thought whatsoever until I was presented with the opportunity. And I did the thing I always do, which is pretty much just to say yes. I find that's kind of my MO, is that I tend to say yes. And it changed truly. That's the one thing I can say changed the course of my life, because it was the response I got from that interview and that conversation that was kind of a lightning rod for me. It really showed me the power of sharing your story and giving people permission to feel the things they need to feel and to have the open, vulnerable conversations. And it just was such a powerful watershed moment for me that it just all of a sudden was like a runaway train. And I started getting invited onto lots of different podcasts and lots of different platforms to share my story. And then that, of course, gave way to writing about it and ultimately starting my own podcast earlier this year, and just continuing on with other projects like creating the HelpHUB, founding that platform as a resource for people. And I have another book coming out in April that's very different. It's a memoir. It's about losing my father twice, and it's a lot of other things too. It's more of a field guide for how to navigate survival after suicide loss. So you can see all these things have kind of sprung up as a result of just that one watershed moment of
Yeah.
opening up.
I have to say, you said you just kind of sat with it, and that is one of the things that I am most proud of doing. Instead of pushing things down, I sat with my pain, and that allows for you to heal on such a personal level. Sometimes you need to do that in solitude without, like you said, with therapy is a wonderful resource that I've taken advantage of in my life as well. But there is such value in just kind of sitting with it and saying it is what it is. And I applaud you for that, because it takes courage to look things in the face sometimes, but that's where you get the biggest insight,
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
make peace with what has happened to you or to your loved ones. I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
The Help Hub, so I love that it describes itself as an inclusive, trauma informed platform. So,
Mhm.
so let's go back to, we talked a little bit about that watershed moment, but let's tell me what it was like to create that, and then to find that people really resonated with the resources that you were providing. And because it sounds, when I read about it, it's so inclusive for all different types of situations. And I just said, oh, that's a resource that probably so many people wish they had for so many years.
Well, I wish that I had had it. So it all goes back to that philosophy of, you know, if you don't see something out there, create it. And that was really the impetus for the whole thing. I think the majority of the decision to create it, or the inspiration, really was rooted in my work on lifelines. I I had the benefit of now being trained. I was in this position where I was holding a tremendous amount of space for so many different kinds of people, all walks of life, all types of situations. I mean, lifelines, contrary to what a lot of people think, lifelines are not just places to call when you are in a suicidal frame of mind. It could be you've just experienced a bad breakup, or maybe you're experiencing abuse or homelessness, or you're coming out and you're afraid of your family disowning you. I mean, there's so many different reasons why someone takes advantage of a lifeline. And so I hold a lot of space for a lot of different people. And one of the other things that we do a tremendous amount of, we give resources. We provide resources. We point people in directions. We give people tools that we may have access to. And so I was kind of stockpiling all of those tools. I don't know why. I didn't know why at the time, but it became very clear to me kind of very suddenly when I had my original website. It was just lisasugarman.com. It was just the place that anyone who may want to take a peek at my content would go. That was it. It was very simple. And ultimately, as I started evolving into this role of advocate, I wanted to also be able to give people resources. And like so many sites, they have resource pages that have some of the bigger resources out there, like the 90-Day Crisis Lifeline and National Alliance on Mental Illness and all of the crisis text line. And so I started adding that to my website, and it was kind of the back page. And then the list, I think I just got a little obsessed with adding to it and then adding to that and continuing on to build this incredibly diverse list that had no structure, it had no form, it had no real uh, architecture built into it. It was just a list. And so it got to the point where it was so big that I felt like it had so much value, but not in the form that it was in. And so I really just took a step back and looked at what it was and what it represented. And all of a sudden, I just saw different groups emerging within that list: the LGBTQ community, veterans, the elderly, parents and children, the AAPI community, um, all sorts of different communities where we all deal with the same issues like grief or loss, or in the case of what I'm passionate about, suicide, awareness and prevention, mental illness. But the way that we support ourselves and the way that we go through it is often so different based on the community that we're in. That's just the way that it is. However, there wasn't any one place that I could ever find, and I did look extensively. I couldn't find any one place where anybody in any community could go to get the resources that supported their unique needs. So that's when I kind of broke my website apart, and I thought that that directory that I had accumulated was the most important thing. So I made that front and center, and to me, it felt like a hub, a help hub. So I rebranded everything, and when you go on to the HelpHUB, the very first thing that you see when you hit the landing page is a grid. I think now we have maybe 17 or 18 different categories, like, BIPOC, mindfulness, online mental health, and so on and so forth. And you click on any of those categories, and that takes you to another dedicated page that has resources for that community to support the needs of that community, which might be different than the others. And then there's a more generalized toolbox where people can download or share or print different tools that maybe can help you de-escalate if you're in crisis, or maybe you can ask someone who's grieving how you can help. You can check in on a friend who you don't think is okay and have the right language to do that. So there are all sorts of tools built in now as well. And it's just really taken on a life of its own. And I'm working now with recovery.com. They're a partner of ours to bring a whole new treatment aspect into the HelpHUB, where people can go directly to the HelpHUB and now find treatment options that suit their unique needs. So we're hopefully helping people to find the resources that they need when they need the most and have them be a click away. That's really the essence of what the HelpHUB is and what it continues to be, and it just continues to grow.
That is beautiful. Collaborating with recovery.com for treatment options, that's the next logical step. When people find HelpHUB and they're struggling, oftentimes it's difficult to seek out practitioners, because you're like, well, I should be able to, get through this. I should be able to work my way. So having it right there with the other resources seems like a logical next step. In building it, talk to me about the stigma that still exists about mental health, and how you present information and how you educate people, that stigma should no longer exist, because we all struggle with mental health issues from one time or another.
I love the question, and I appreciate the question, and it's very simple. The answer is very, very simple. In everything that I do and all of the content that I create, and that content comes in many different forms. It may be I write a lot of articles and on different platforms. We have a YouTube channel as well that I create a lot of short form video content where people can go on, and everything is 90 seconds or less, and you can hear me talk about what anticipatory grief is, or what to say or not to say to someone who's struggling, and whether it be a podcast or whether it be a column. Everything that I do is done in such a way that it makes talking about the things that I believe we all need to be talking about openly and honestly. I do it unapologetically. That's the essence of all of it. I show up in a way that says this conversation belongs here. We need to be talking about this. Don't be afraid to talk about this. Run toward the hard thing instead of away from it, because when you run toward it, that's when you take away its power to intimidate you or to paralyze you. So that's how everything on the HelpHUB is really constructed. It's really designed to just have the conversations out in the open so that others will have the permission that they need to do the same. Did that answer your question?
It does. And it kind of leads into my next question for you, because I think that storytelling and your decision to tell your story, it plays a big part in it, because that too gives people permission to tell their own story. I love that, by doing that, I mean, I don't think people, when you're in the thick of it, you don't always realize the power of looking something in the face and telling your own story, that you can let go of the shadow and the shame. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
No.
It's just what's happening to you now, and you can move forward from it. What relationship do you feel storytelling plays in the hub?
Oh, I think it's the central tenet of all of it. I mean, my story, personally, my story is what all of this was born from. Everything that I've done up to this point, whether it be in the form of a book or a video or a podcast or an interview, everything is just a different version of my story, and that story becomes a vehicle for reaching people and having a bigger, broader, more open conversation. That's the whole point. I think it's the most valuable tool any of us has, because I mean, at the end of the day, we all have a story. Maybe your story isn't mental illness, or maybe you haven't lost someone to suicide, or maybe you're not struggling in some other area of your life that others are, but you probably have something else happening that is a story that is, I don't want to say that every single one of us has a trauma, but I think the vast majority of us do have something like that in our, in our history, and it's when we acknowledge those things and we just we lift them up to the foreground. That's when we normalize talking about the things that have been stigmatized, that have been taboo, that have been overlooked or hidden for so many generations. I think back just in terms of what life was like when I lost my father the first time. It was 1978. I was an only child. My mother was 40 years old. She was a widow. One night she was married. The next morning she woke up, she was a widow. She worked part-time as a secretary. She didn't, I mean, there were no support groups. There were no crisis lifelines. Anyone who talked openly about depression or mental illness or seeing a therapist was immediately blackballed, immediately looked at as different or other or less than or troubled or broken. And I mean, that's in my lifetime. I'm in my late 50s, and that is in one generation, this shift to where you and I are sitting here having this conversation so easily and so openly about so many different things that would never have been talked about 20, 30 years ago. Like, we're making progress. We have a way to go, but we're making progress. And I want a Help Hub to be that safe space where people can find the help, find the resources, find the tools, start the conversations, be part of the community where all of those things are normal.
Hey guys, Kelly here. I wanted to jump in and let you know that you can find out more about my work by visiting my website at kellybuckley.com, or you can find my books on Amazon. Okay, back to the episode.
You said something earlier, and it just reminded me of something that, sometimes people show up with severe traumas. They show up at the Help Hub with something that has absolutely devastated them. And another person shows up in the same amount of need, but outside perception might say, well, I mean, everybody goes through that kind of stuff, but it's all relative, right? It's all relative to how you show up, how in your life you have been educated about response and coping with difficult emotions. And one of the things that I've found in the bereavement community, which is primarily my area of focus, is that I always say when I speak to people, my grief or your grief is not, I don't win. There's no competition here for who has the most trauma in this room. And I sometimes feel like when we categorize ourselves so strictly that we prevent ourselves from connecting, because the pain and that we feel sometimes is universal, and it doesn't matter that it's not the same situation. But when we feel like we have to categorize ourselves, we sometimes alienate ourselves from other people who might connect with us and provide healing. So talk to me a little bit about that, because it seems like you've opened it up so that anybody who arrives can see that there's a community that maybe it's not the same background or situation, but we're all here together, showing up, looking for a way to heal.
Yeah, I love the direction that this conversation just took, because I really appreciate that question. The way I see it, I absolutely agree with you, first of all, in terms of people's own individual pain. People are territorial, I think, in some ways. And so it may come across as like, oh, but my trauma, but my grief, but my loss, but, and there's like a hierarchy. I can see that. I've seen it. I've seen it a million times. I look at it differently. And at the Help Hub, we look at it differently. And we look at it not in terms of who is elevated over whom, but it's a bond. It's a completely different state of mind. we are bonded in grief. We are bonded in loss. We are bonded if you're navigating mental illness or caring for someone who is, or if you've lost someone to suicide. Like for instance, last night I moderate. You mentioned in my bio, I moderate. I co-facilitate a very specialized grief group for suicide loss survivors called Safe Place, and it's through Samaritans here in Boston. And to be a facilitator, you obviously have to be trained, which I have been, and you also have to be a survivor of a suicide loss. So one of the things I said last night, because we had a really, really dynamic conversation with some of the people who came to the group, and people had very radically different experiences, some new losses, some older losses, multiple losses, traumatic losses, but the essence of all of it, and I called this out at the end, and everybody just kind of immediately grabbed on to that comment. I said, we have all experienced this in such radically different ways, but we are all bonded together. We're not separated by it all and put into different buckets. We are bonded together, which is what this whole sense of community is woven from. So that's how I view things when people come to the HelpHUB. Yeah, for everyone, loss is subjective, grief is subjective, your circumstances, the dynamics, everything is different, but yet we bond over the things that are shared, which is that we loved our person, we are grieving our person, we miss our person. All of those bits and pieces are the things that we should be focused on, because that's the essence of community. That's why people find community, whether they're recovering from substance abuse, whether they're a cancer survivor, whether they've lost a loved one to suicide, whatever it is that you're seeking out in community, you're seeking the people who understand the loss that you had or understand the struggle that you've battled.
Talk to me about loneliness. In our world today, we are more connected than ever, but we sometimes seem more isolated in very big ways. We're going through a very tumultuous time in history where there's tons of discussion about division and differences. Speak to me about that.
That is another conversation altogether in the world that we are living in right now.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say that it has polarized people. It has paralyzed people. It has made it very difficult, I think, for people to know where they stand anymore, maybe within the communities that they once felt comfortable in. I know I feel that way. And I think that it's more important because of that. It's more important than ever that we all shore up our boundaries, that we all take real stock of where we put our focus, where we put our energy, where we spend our time, what kind of things we consume, what kind of conversations we have, where do we get our news, how often are we online. I know look, I can only speak for myself and in my own life, my own habits. I've spent more time working on my own personal boundaries in the last, I would say, year to 2 years of my life than I ever have in my life altogether, because I saw how grossly depleted I was getting, not only by considering everybody else in my life before I considered myself, which is another issue altogether. That has nothing to do with loneliness. But I was also letting things in that were toxic to me, and I needed to put that here. And I think a lot of people are retreating and maybe not doing the work to build the appropriate boundaries. They're turning to isolation. They're just shutting down. They're just closing off. They're pulling back. And I think because people aren't intentional, some people may not be intentional yet about the way that they engage with the world around them, that they're just closing the circle super tight. And they're not, they're self-isolating in a lot of ways. And I think I think as time goes on, if people don't pay attention to that and do that in a more calculated way that allows them to just siphon out what's not okay for them and keep what's good, I think we're going to run into a loneliness epidemic that supersedes anything we've experienced so far.
Yeah, that is incredibly powerful. I think too, I feel exactly the same as you. I've spent some time over the past year or two working on my boundaries as well. But also looking at asking the question, well, and I think, is this real or is this an illusion? I mean, this is our world today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm feeling alone because I feel lonely because I'm not connecting with people, is that an illusion that I have created in my own mind because I've consumed things online? Or is that true? And sometimes you have to take the step out and take the risk, and then you realize that was an illusion. I was never separate from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
We have the ability to do
We
that.
do. We absolutely do. We absolutely do. And we are in control of that as individuals. And it's hard to separate out fact from fiction nowadays. And it's hard to know where people stand, and it goes beyond being just cautious. And, I had an interesting experience yesterday that really threw me. It's funny the timing of us having this conversation. Someone I hadn't seen in a long time, who I don't generally communicate with on the regular. This is just someone who has a very unique role in my life. It's hard to explain. Someone who has been in my life for decades, came into my life very unexpectedly. We have a very unique relationship that I don't have with anyone else. And I saw this person and I was thrilled to see this person. And we're chatting and we're chatting. And all of a sudden, what we were chatting about was so innocuous: how my kids are doing, how their wife is doing. And then all of a sudden, a comment was made that, and it's not even relevant what the comment is. Let's just say that it was a very one-sided, this is like, when you make this kind of a comment to anyone, it is like holding up a flag saying, here is where my loyalties are in the world. This is what I believe. Okay. It threw me for such a complete loop because this person went out of their way to just launch this at me. This person knows nothing about what I believe, how I feel. I keep those things very, very personal. They're right here. And it left me shook, Kelly. It really did, because I tried to say, well, there's extremism on both sides, and extremism in any way is, I don't think, a very healthy thing. This person wanted to just place blame. I don't know where it all came from or why. And I left that conversation feeling like I don't even know who I'm talking to anymore. I didn't see that coming. It hit me like a brick directly to my face. And it just really made me take stock of everything that you're saying right now. And so I could have chosen to immediately kind of empty that person out of my heart and kind of go down one road in my heart and mind about that. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because therein lies the problem. It is when we can't. I wanted to say, okay, so I could have that conversation, and I shared my thoughts because someone asked me, and we have to get to a place where we can have conversations, we can talk to people, we can express our feelings or our differences or our fears or whatever they are. And I don't know if this has gotten radically off topic from what we were talking about, but it to me, it felt like it was the essence of what you were talking about. Like, we as individuals all have to choose how we react to the world that we have been presented with right now.
Right. And the reason that I bring this up, and I think that it is so timely, is that for somebody who is experiencing a mental health crisis right now, and like you felt like it was a brick to your face, for someone who situations like that can compound and intensify any crisis that they may be experiencing, especially if they have a situation similar to what you're describing. And they thought that they were speaking to someone where they were going to get support, and then they find out, oh, okay, so it's just a very interesting time to be alive. And I because people have lost that ability to have those conversations and be supportive of someone, even if you don't necessarily agree with them 100%. How can we improve? There's been plenty of times over the past few years that I'm like, this gratitude thing and talking to people, like, is this like, am I just like singing in a big windstorm? And it makes you question. It does. But the key part is, if we stop doing the work that we're doing, then that void is just going to be larger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree.
So let's take a different road here. I want to talk to you about a person who is in some sort of crisis or distress, and they show up at HelpHUB. Mm-hmm. Kind of walk me through how that would flow. So someone goes to HelpHUB and they're having a very difficult time with, and you can pick one of the topics. Just tell me how they access it, how they connect with other people. Kind of give someone who's maybe listening right now and is going to go to HelpHUB after this episode, tell them how that's going to flow for them.
Okay, so one thing I think that's important to clarify is that the HelpHUB provides connection to everything from crisis lifeline resources to tools to online mental health providers who can provide something like counseling per se or treatment options. What the HelpHUB is not, no one is a licensed clinician or therapist. What the HelpHUB is an enormous database of resources, of links to connect you to the help or the community or the resource that you need. So let's say someone comes in, and let's say it's someone who is part of the LGBTQ community, and they're really struggling because they've come out and their family has shunned them, has disowned them, which happens all too often. And they don't know where to turn. They don't know where to go. They don't know what the first step is. They just know that this is consuming them emotionally. They could go to the HelpHUB And as I mentioned a little while ago, when you land on that page, there is a very, very easy to navigate grid. It's got thumbnail photos, and inside each photo is the name of that category. So that person would look at the LGBTQ plus category and click on it. And then they would say, well, maybe I need resources like a coming out handbook. So they could go to the Trevor Project. They could click on the Trevor Project and they could find a coming out handbook. So a resource or a community or a tool is a click or two away. Maybe they want to talk to a counselor. They can immediately go directly to the 988 crisis lifeline or directly to the crisis text line if they'd rather text someone. They can find and access support groups for a variety of different issues. Maybe it's somebody from AA. They're dealing with substance abuse, alcohol abuse, and they want to find a support group. They can find it there. Let's say someone else is coming in because they just cannot find a therapist who can take them on. They need therapy options. They need to do it remotely. Maybe they don't have insurance, and maybe they're looking for options. I have some partnerships with Calmery, with BetterHelp, with Talkspace, and I list all of the other major platforms as well on the online mental health services category. So you would show up to the HelpHUB and say, God, I need to find a therapist and I need someone right now that I can talk to virtually. You would click on that particular category and it takes you to a laundry list of, and it's not just a list. So you click on that page, and this is true for every category in the HelpHUB. When you click on that category, whatever it may be, you're going to a sub page, also on the HelpHUB, but it's a sub page. Everything is alphabetized. There is the logo of the organization, a description of the organization, and a direct link to the organization. So you can kind of eyeball and see, okay, well, I'm looking for online therapy, and here are a bunch of options. I'm going to click this one, and that takes you directly to that provider so that you can get started. I mentioned earlier, I'm now trying to help people find the treatment that they need through my partnership with recovery.com. So right on that HelpHUB landing page is a big button that says find treatment. You click on that, it takes you to a page that explains everything about what recovery.com does, how to get involved, how to find the resources. You click and find the resources that you need. So that's how someone can utilize the HelpHUB. Maybe someone is coming on and it's not about themselves. Maybe they're looking for ways to have a conversation with someone they know. Maybe a coworker's not okay. Maybe they know something's wrong, but they don't know how to have the conversation. What do I say? I'm worried about this person. Go to the tools, click on tools, and navigate down through some of the tool options and find what to say to someone who's struggling and what not to say. And they click on that and they download that on their phone. So now they can call their friend up and have a conversation and know what to say and know the language to use. Maybe a mother is dealing with a child who is really, really dysregulated and they need to calm them down. And they're having some kind of a panic attack. You go also to the tool section and you say grounding exercises. You click on the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise, which is a very universal grounding exercise, and you can walk through that. You can download it on your phone. You can print it out and put it on the fridge so that when your child is having that dysregulation again, they can maybe help themselves a little easier. So there are so many different ways that someone can utilize the HelpHUB. And again, maybe they're interested in reading an article about what anticipatory grief is, or they want to take a peek at a video, a quick video about why we need to stop saying committed suicide, why there are other options and we should be using those. So they click on the video. They just want a little bit more information. Or maybe it's someone who has just lost a loved one to suicide and they are in the thick of it and they don't know what to do and they don't know where they belong. So they click on my podcast and they listen to an episode of The Survivors, and We share our stories, what it's like to navigate that kind of grief, and we talk openly and honestly, and that gives them permission, maybe, to start talking themselves. So there are a million different ways. Those are just a few I can think of.
I love that explanation, and I love the fact that people who go to the Help Hub, they still maintain that sense of autonomy. They're still looking and they're finding that solution that's best to them. And
Mhm.
I also love, because when you Google these days, you really don't know, is this good, or I'm not sure about that, but you have assembled these. You know what these groups can do. You know how they can help a person. So it's like a trusted resource. I think that's so important these days.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I've vetted every single link in every category over the last handful of years as I've been building the hub. Everything has been vetted by me, so you know that where you're going is authentic. Where you're going can be trusted. You don't have to put any thought into it. And that's the other thing that was the impetus, part of the impetus for creating this whole platform is when you are in a state of dysregulation, you're having a panic attack, or you're grieving, or you're depressed, or you're having an anxiety attack, any of the things that can throw us. When you're in that place, especially if you're suicidal, you can't think clearly. You're not going to make a rational decision. You don't know which end is up, or what you need to do next, or where you should go for help. So what I've tried to do in creating this platform is creating a place that's really user friendly, where someone can say, okay, they either see it and they can click on it, or they read it quickly and they know, okay, that's what I need right now. It's obvious what I need. I need crisis support. Click. I'm experiencing this kind of crisis. I need that. Click. And now you're there.
Because because for the most part, you're showing up to Help Hub at probably one of your darkest days, and so
Mhm.
you need that ease of navigation.
Yeah.
Um, you've experienced tremendous loss in your life, and now you counsel others who are in crisis. How is I work with the bereaved primarily. How have your perspectives on grief and healing and resilience evolved over time?
I think grief is such an unusual place to be. I think that I have a love-hate relationship with grief. That's what I've learned, that grieving never ends. We're always grieving the people we love, and I wouldn't ever want that to end, because that's the tether that tethers me to my person or my people who I've lost. So while it's incredibly painful and draining and emotional to be in a state of grief and loss, it's also the thing that I feel keeps me connected to, in my case, my dad or my friend or my cousin or any of the other people I've lost in a variety of other ways. And so I've learned that it's just this thing that ebbs and flows, and that at the end of the day, it's love. It's just another way. It's what happens when we can't love our person directly. That's what it turns into. That's what that love turns into. So I would always opt to have my person, but that's not always possible. And when you can't, the next best thing that you have is actually this way of staying connected to them, and that's grief. But not all grief is bad. Like, we can still create and maintain relationships with the people that we've lost. And I really believe in that. That's one of the other things that I've learned, is that just because our person is gone doesn't mean we can't build on the connection and the bond that we have with that person. We just do it in different ways.
Right. I mean, I call my work Stephen's Ripple. You have Help
Mm,
Hub that I mean, I think that one of the greatest gifts, certainly we did not want to lose our loved one,
right.
but one of the greatest gifts that grief can give us is the power to turn that pain into a purpose.
Yes.
And it also provides such clarity on what really matters in life. When you
Exactly.
lose someone, I mean,
Exactly.
all of the fluff is just stripped away. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's gone. Um, that's a beautiful way to describe grief. I love that. Um, is there any other part of your work that you want to talk to us about today?
Um, you know, honestly, the one thing, and I know we did touch on it, is the book that I have that's coming out. I'm very excited about it for so many different ways because it's far more than just a story or a memoir. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that it also distills down the HelpHUB.
Mm.
So it's a field guide. It's a lot of different things. It's a toolkit. It's a permission slip to navigate loss in whatever way you need to navigate it that works for you, that makes sense for you. And, it's kind of a living, breathing embodiment of my dad and our relationship, and my mother is a part of it. She is making some very exciting cameos in this book that no one really knows about yet. I think I may be talking about it here for the first time. So I've brought her not only into the story, of course, because it's our story, but I've actually brought her voice into the book as well. And it's a lot more than just navigating suicide loss, like what happens after you lose someone that way. It's about grief, it's about loss, it's about navigating the things that are hard in life and doing what you and I have talked so much about today is sitting in what we need to sit in the ways we need to sit in it, how to find community, the power of community. So that's that's the thing that's been on my mind a lot lately as we get closer and closer to that coming out in the spring. So
That's so
yeah,
exciting for you.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I love that you're bringing your mother's voice into it as well. That's incredibly meaningful. I mean, her own journey. Um, that's, I mean, just think about, you were a young child. That must have been a very difficult time for her, um, to be a parent and just to be a widow at the same time. It must. I mean, I have the greatest respect for her and how she must have really had to navigate such difficult times.
Yeah, especially, well, thank you for that. And she will listen to this because she listens to everything that that I do in this way. And so she's probably thanking you too. But she had some other things going on kind of in tandem with that too. It wasn't just that she was raising me alone and raising me so suddenly. My mother kept that secret about my father's suicide from everyone. It wasn't just me. My
Mm.
mother did not share the truth about my father's death with a living soul because she was afraid that somehow it would end up getting back to me and didn't want that to happen. So not only did my mother deal with being a widow and raising a child and navigating all the things that are part of a person's life alone, my mother also didn't have any process that particular kind of loss for 35 years. So for me, at this point, that's a hidden gift in all this. I'm grateful that I know the truth for obvious reasons, but the most important reason for me is the less obvious reason. I'm grateful that I know the truth so that I can be there now to support my mom, so that
Mm.
she can have the conversation, so that she can process all of her grief, so that she can cycle through this loss in the ways that she needed to. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the double-edged part of all of it for me.
I mean, I feel I'm listening to you talk about your beautiful mom, and um, it's humbling sometimes when you hear about mama bears who tuck their children behind them in the worst type of circumstance, and
Mm,
they protect them in the ways that they know how at
mhm.
that time. And for her, I mean, that this must be an incredibly healing time for her in her life, all these years later. Um, to be in your upcoming book and to see what you have created from your life story.
It's honestly, if she were here right now in this conversation, she would do what she always does. She would just beaming, like grinning from ear to ear. She has read every word of every book, article, column, read any body of work I've ever written. She's edited everything for me all these years, listened to every interview I've ever recorded, and she is my biggest cheerleader. And it's so interesting. We've had now since the day that this all came out, since the truth came out about a dozen years ago, we've been involved in what I feel like is a 12-year long conversation that I don't suspect will ever end. And we've talked about it and talked about it in a million different ways. She's experienced some therapy now for the first time. She has been on podcasts with me. So her world has expanded in so many different ways around all of this, and she's been able to just be out in the open about it, which has, I think, been the most beautiful part of all of it. And she's become her own fierce little advocate for awareness and prevention, and has really shown up in some beautiful ways around that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, you're going to have to make a deal with me now that when the book comes out in the spring, that you and your mom are going to have to come back.
Deal. Absolutely. I'm also her agent, so I'm acting as her unofficial agent now, booking all of her her podcast appearances. Yeah, I would be absolutely thrilled, and I'm sure she would be thrilled. She has really surprised me in the most incredible ways in the last, decade plus. And she continues to surprise me. Like when we actually do have experiences where we talk about our past together, and my dad, she just slides into these conversations like she's been doing it for a decade. It's so funny. She's 87 years old. She is so passionate now about speaking her mind around this that she shows up every chance she gets to talk about it. So I can guarantee you the invitation will be accepted.
That is wonderful to hear. Before we go, can you tell our audience how they can connect with you and how they can connect with the HelpHUB?
Sure, it's all the same. It's all very, very easy. Anyone listening to this who wants to reach me in any capacity can just go directly to the helphub.co. Links to all the socials. We're on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and Facebook. You can find us there. There's also a page that's dedicated to leaving us comments. You can reach out to me that way. If you need some information that you don't see on the Help Hub, definitely let me know. And if there is something that you feel belongs on the Help, I'm only one person. So it's hard for me to make sure that I've captured everything that I want to capture. I'm constantly adding to the Help Hub. If there is something that know people should have as a resource that you don't see there, please reach out to me. Let me know it's there. I will immediately make sure it becomes a part of the Help Hub. I want that kind of feedback. And certainly if you have a story that you want to share, we're encouraging people to give us that kind of feedback as well. And I'm always looking for voices to share stories on my podcast, The Survivors. So you go to the Help Hub and you can find me and everything that I do and all the places I do it in the same spot.
Excellent. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to our next conversation in spring.
Oh, well, I did too, and it was the highlight of my day, and I'm now excited. Now I'm thinking about the spring and picking up where we left off.
All right. Well, you tell your mom I can't wait to meet her.
I will. I absolutely will, and I can promise you she'll be thrilled to meet you right back.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining me today on Broken Beautiful Me. I hope you found today's episode inspiring and insightful. Remember, every scar tells a story, and every story has the power to heal. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Your support means the world to me, and it helps spread the message of hope and resilience to more people like us. Don't forget to leave a review and share this podcast with your friends and family. Together, we can create a community of strength and beauty in our brokenness. Until next time, stay strong, stay beautiful, and keep shining.